The cold truth about why Mars really died. Mars did not die in fire or impact. It froze slowly, quietly, until nothing could survive. And the reason it happened is far more unsettling than most people realize. The planet's fate emerged not from dramatic catastrophe, but from processes so gradual that no alarm could have sounded in time. To understand why Mars really died, we have to move past simple explanations. It was not just distance from the sun or a smaller size. Mars matters today because its failure exposes how planetary systems unravel when core protections weaken. The same physics that shaped Mars still governs every living world. Understanding that connection transforms Mars from distant curiosity into urgent lesson. At first, Mars looked stable. It had volcanoes releasing heat, an atmosphere thick enough to trap warmth, and water cycling across its surface. These systems reinforced each other. Energy flowed. Climate held. Life, if it emerged, had time. Mars was not fragile in its early years. It was balanced. That balance persisted for hundreds of millions of years, creating conditions that could have supported biological complexity. But that balance depended on one hidden engine, the planet's interior. As long as Mars's core remained active, it generated a magnetic field. That field shielded the atmosphere and slowed the loss of heat and water. It was invisible but essential. Without it, every other system became vulnerable to external forces. Over time, that engine weakened. Mars is smaller than Earth, and it cooled faster. As the core lost energy, the magnetic field faded. When that protection disappeared, Mars became exposed. Solar radiation began stripping the atmosphere away. Heat escaped more easily. Water became unstable. The planet entered a decline that would prove irreversible. This was not a sudden collapse. It was a slow drift into vulnerability. Mars crossed thresholds without signals. Each loss made the next inevitable. And once enough systems failed, recovery became impossible. The interconnected nature of the collapse meant that no single intervention could have reversed it. The cold truth is that Mars did not die because it was unlucky. It died because its safeguards failed one by one. And when the final protections disappeared, the planet had nothing left to hold on to life. That systematic failure carries implications that extend far beyond astronomy. As Mars lost its magnetic shield, the consequences rippled outward. Without protection, the atmosphere thinned faster than it could be replenished. Gases essential for warmth and stability escaped into space. What remained could no longer regulate temperature or pressure. The planet's ability to moderate itself vanished incrementally. This atmospheric loss triggered a cascade of failures. Liquid water became impossible on the surface. Rivers dried. Lakes evaporated. Ice retreated underground or into the poles. With less water vapor in the air, heat retention weakened further. Mars began to cool beyond recovery. Each change accelerated the next, creating feedback loops that reinforced decline. At the same time, volcanic activity slowed. Without eruptions to recycle gases back into the atmosphere, the planet lost another stabilizing force. The feedback loops that once sustained Mars turned against it. Each decline reinforced the next. Systems that had maintained balance for millions of years became instruments of destruction. Mars did not experience a single fatal blow. It experienced attrition. Small losses accumulating over immense time. From the planet's perspective, the change was continuous. From a human perspective, it would have been almost impossible to notice until everything was already gone. That disconnect between timescales and perception makes the warning harder to internalize. Modern instruments now measure what remains: a thin atmosphere, extreme temperature swings, radiation levels that destroy organic molecules. Mars today is not hostile by accident. It is hostile by outcome. The current conditions represent the endpoint of processes that began when the planet's defenses failed. What makes this story so unsettling is how ordinary it is. No exotic physics. No rare event. Just known processes playing out without interruption. Mars followed the rules perfectly, and that is why its fate matters. The same rules govern every planet, including the one humanity calls home. Because if a planet with water, energy, and time could still fail, then survival depends on more than favorable beginnings. It depends on protection, balance, and intervention before loss becomes permanent. That realization shifts responsibility from luck to action. The conflict at the heart of Mars's death lies in how easily its decline was misunderstood. For years, explanations focus on surface conditions: cold temperatures, thin air, dust storms. But these were symptoms, not causes. The visible manifestations of decline distracted from the underlying mechanisms. The true conflict was hidden deep within the planet. Mars lost its ability to defend itself. Once the magnetic field faded, everything else followed. Yet by the time this was understood, the damage was irreversible. The planet had already crossed its point of no return. Knowledge arrived too late to matter. This realization challenges how we think about planetary survival. Surface stability is not enough. A world can look calm while its foundation fails. Mars teaches that collapse begins long before it becomes visible. The lesson demands attention to systems that operate beneath perception. There is also a human conflict embedded in this story. We tend to notice change only when it disrupts daily life. Slow decline feels manageable. Incremental loss feels reversible. Mars shows that this instinct is flawed. Some processes accelerate after thresholds are crossed, even if the initial changes seem small. That acceleration catches observers off guard. Mars did not die because it lacked water or warmth. It died because it lost resilience. And resilience depends on systems we rarely see or think about until they are gone. The invisible foundations of stability receive less attention than they deserve. This creates a dangerous comfort. If collapse is slow, it feels controllable. If it is quiet, it feels distant. Mars proves that both assumptions are wrong. The planet contradicts intuitions that might otherwise guide behavior. The planet's frozen surface is not just a result of physics. It is a record of what happens when foundational systems fail unnoticed. And that is the conflict we are still struggling to recognize. Acknowledging it requires confronting assumptions that comfort normally protects. The climax of Mars's story is the moment we realized it could not be saved, not because it lacked technology or time, but because its core protections were already gone. Once the magnetic field failed and the atmosphere escaped, Mars was locked into a frozen future. The point of no return had passed before anyone understood it existed. There was no single decision that doomed the planet, no dramatic error, only the accumulation of losses that went unaddressed for too long. Mars teaches that survival does not end with one mistake. It ends when systems weaken beyond recovery. That gradual erosion proves more dangerous than sudden catastrophe. The resolution is uncomfortable but clear. A planet does not need to explode to die. It only needs its safeguards to fail quietly. Mars stands as proof that balance must be maintained constantly, not assumed permanently. The evidence is written across its surface in every dried riverbed and eroded crater. Today, Mars remains exactly where that path leads. Cold, exposed, unforgiving. A world preserved in the final stage of decline, not as a tragedy, but as evidence. The planet serves as documentation of what happens when protection fails. What makes Mars matter now is not what it was, but what it became. A reminder that protection comes before expansion, that prevention matters more than repair, and that once critical thresholds are crossed, ambition alone cannot reverse them. Those lessons apply wherever systems depend on balance. The silence of Mars carries weight that statistics cannot convey. Every measurement confirms what the planet lost, but no instrument can capture what might have been. Mars represents potential foreclosed, pathways sealed, futures erased before they could unfold. That absence speaks louder than any data point. And so Mars waits, frozen in time, offering its story to anyone willing to pay attention. The cold truth is not merely about one planet's fate. It is about the nature of survival itself, about how easily balance can slip away, about how quiet endings prove most devastating of all. Sometimes the smallest shift in perspective becomes the beginning of a new future. The